thank you so much for joining us today on the Funny Business Podcast. For those at home listening, tell us, who are you? What do you do?
David Swan, or Swanny. I'm the technology editor at the Australian newspaper.
Lach wanted to use the joke of, we've got Dane Swan from the Collingwood Football Club, Swanny, on here. And
I was going to ask you about your Brownlow, and then, but it was a shit
joke.
joke. So you brought it up, so I don't even know why you've done that.
It was a shit joke. I thought I'd bring it up.
Oh, make me...
I'm happy to just be in character as Dane Swan for the rest of the podcast and just chat about footy and my various exploits. Might be more interesting.
No, mate, we're very interested in what you're doing, mate, because we saw a post, I think it was yesterday. Big Elon Musk has just tweeted out your story. You must have felt good about that.
Huge. Yeah, I should just retire on a high, basically. This is sort of it for me, I think. Someone asked on LinkedIn, is this sort of the biggest distribution you've ever had for one of your stories? And I'm like, shit, probably. I mean, the national paper is what it is, but to have Elon tweet out one of your stories, yeah, huge for me. So you guys are getting me on a good day. This is good.
You mentioned off air that because the article was behind a paywall, you don't know how many people actually read it. Surely you got the number of clicks though. How many people landed on that one? Was it like through the roof?
I don't know if that's confidential, but let's just say it's not. It got probably about 1,000% more clicks than what my average story would. It was definitely in the sort of tens of thousands in terms of people clicking through. On a typical story, I might get sort of a few thousand clicks and people sort of reading it. But this did sort of, hundreds of percent more than that. So if he can just keep tweeting my other stories too, that would be great.
What happens to your inbox? Does it just get flooded? Are you just like, shit, I got to turn the phone off? Or are you just like, fucking, I'm lapping this up, baby. I'm replying to everyone. This is my time.
In general, it's a shit show. So it's pretty much just business as usual in terms of my email inbox is just not a good place. It's a lot. So yeah, it's just pretty much same old as far as that's concerned.
How did you get into this space? How did you end up doing what you're doing?
It's interesting. I went to the Herald Sun for work experience in high school when I was in year 9, I think. And I work now in the same building that I did work experience sort of 15 years ago or whenever that was. So it's sort of just been pretty constant I think it's quite rare, but I was really clear from early in high school that this is what I wanted to do in terms of journalism, not tech journalism specifically. It could have been politics or crime or anything, sport. But it was a bit accidental of falling into the niche of tech journalism. It was in uni that we got an email to all the journalism students from a tech news website wanting a reporter. And our sort of test assignment to join the team there was to do an iPhone review. And it was really fun. I really enjoyed just like writing 1,000 words about the device and using it. And and then they took me on and paid me through uni and took me full-time out of uni. And that was rare too, just to get a journalism job at all. As I've seen through my career, it's been a sort of shrinking industry and it's been really challenged the whole way through. But so to get a job out of uni was good, and I've done it ever since.
That's crazy. What is it about tech? I feel like if you're
free iPhones and shit, surely they're sending you all the latest stuff. So that's
the biggest first world problem ever, where I have too much stuff. Like
you can't complain. Everyone's going, what? You know what I mean? You got that much stuff. You got that many gifts.
It's a weird thing to complain about. But literally, like in the room where I'm doing this podcast from, is like just piles of phones, because people don't ask too. They sort of just send you stuff without checking first that it's something that you'd even want to review. It is a first world problem. And the weird thing too is sometimes that like they ask for it back sometimes, but you don't know in advance. So like you might just get an email sort of 6 months later being like, oh, hey, can we have that back actually? So my house is kind of a JB Hi-Fi situation in terms of just a lot of stock. It is a good problem to have for sure.
I like that.
You would love that, wouldn't you?
Yeah, I just feel like, how good's that?
Retro ones would be sick, like old iPod shuffles and stuff. Do you just want to have some old retro antiques that'll be worth heaps later? That sounds grouse, yeah.
The problem is you don't know until it's too late what's going to be retro and what's just sort of old shit that's not worth anything. So it's hard to predict in advance. I should just keep everything really, just on the off chance that something's going to be like ultra retro and rare 10 years down the track.
Do you ever think like sliding doors moments where you could have gone down that politics or crime and gone, fuck, my life could have been so different if I just went the other way?
A little bit. My partner's a crime journo herself, and I look at what she does and I realize I could not do that at all in terms of interviews with victims' families and going to crime scenes and things like that. And I'm just in awe that she can do that. It was funny when the pandemic hit and sort of working from home together, the tone of the conversations, where mine was all about capital raises and startups and innovation, and hers was all just really grim. And it just like working together, it made me realize how different our day jobs are, even though they're both journalism. Just the nature of what she does is so incredibly different. So, and I don't think I'd be cut out for that, honestly. It's just I'm going to stick to tech, I think, for sure.
Oh, we're with you there. We try to do for a while there, we're doing like a news podcast or 2 news podcasts, and for a while it's covering the news sometimes.
It changed our mind about lots
depressing.
of things. Yeah, it shaped like something in us, didn't it?
Do you find that difficult working in this space, and obviously being around with your partner still working in crime? Is it like all consuming the media?
It is, and I think you really have to love it. And like, if I wasn't doing this for work, I would be sort of consuming news all day. I think, like, just in my life, I think you have to have a real passion for it and a thirst to know what's going on in the world around you. Otherwise, you just do an easier job. Like, you'd take an office job or do something that's less demanding, because it is always on, and switching off is really hard. Sort of being on holiday, for example, I find I'm always still checking Twitter, reading the news and being plugged in. It's just like this deep thing that you have to always feel like you know what's going on and you're connected to it. When I get sick of that, if that ever happens, then I'll just do something that's easier and pays better.
Is it like a competitive nature of media? So like, if you're not plugged in, you're going to miss the story, or like,
old mate's got the scoop. Fuck.
Yeah. Is it really?
I think so.
The value, the scoop is the value.
Yeah, we're so competitive, and I have like a love-hate relationship with it, because like it is like, oh fuck, someone scooped me on something, but it makes you hungry to go and get the next one and to do a better job than they did. So like, it's sort of, you need that, and it helps because it keeps you hungry and it makes your work better. And we're all friends. We're all sort of frenemies. It's such a small industry. Like, I can probably count the number of full-time tech journalists in Australia on probably 2 hands. Like, it's like, there's just so few of us. And I hate that there's so few of us, because there are so many stories that need to be told and should be told. But the fact that there are so few has given me a lot of opportunities as well. So it's sort of a double-edged sword.
How important is building relationships then, in terms of with everyone, with the whole ecosystem, with your co-workers, with the founders, with the VCs, with everyone? How important is it to always maintain a positive connection with people?
Yeah, like 1,000,000,000%. It's like that, and being able to communicate and write well are sort of the 2 things, because getting the stories is the first part of the equation. And as I said, my inbox is a shit show. So to sort of sift through that, it's the relationships and recognizing, oh, that's someone I trust and someone I've dealt with a lot. And so even more than sort of the subject line or the headline, it's like, this story is coming from someone I have a really good relationship with and that I trust. Because there are people in the PR and comms industry that just feed me shit all the time. And you see right through that, and you think, well, you know, I can't really trust that what you're sending me is good, because it's just shit all the time, versus the ones that only contact me when they know they have something good and something that's worth me doing. So trust and relationships is just everything in this game, absolutely. And given it is such a small industry too, like, people talk, obviously it'd be like any industry really, but maybe it's a bit more acute here, where it's so small that if someone does something that breaches trust or fucks up in some way, then, you know, word spreads quickly and just, you know, people get found out. So I think trust and reputation and having those good relationships, I mean, I look at it as, yeah, just pretty much the most important thing.
What about actual, like, the story itself? I can imagine as a journalist, as someone who writes and puts their opinions out on paper, you would have got a lot better. Do you mind going into a bit of like the actual skill of writing for people who need to do content, or people, businesses out there who this is the vehicle to tell their own narrative, tell their own story? What are some of the learnings that you've done, or some mistakes you made early that maybe people can avoid doing?
Yeah. It's funny because all my earliest stuff is like still online, which is like really cringy. Like you could go back to the stuff from like 10 years ago and it would be quote unquote like bad. Like I wouldn't be proud of it. Everyone gets better at something as they do it over time. I think the biggest thing for me, and like I had to learn it by doing it, but it was just writing, where I would just sit with like the word processor and just overthink it. And I think the biggest thing is people psych themselves out when they're trying to write, because I think there's some like secret formula, and it's not. Like, just start writing, and if it's shit you can edit it later and make it better after. But it's just to like get over your sort of inner ego or fear that it's going to be bad, because it might be bad, but it's like, just do it and you can fix it later. I think starting is often the hardest bit, so I've learned not to be a perfectionist and just start, and you can fix it later.
Like that.
Oh, so even when you're publishing stuff and you got a deadline, is there stuff that's swirling around in your brain going, fuck, do I have this paragraph? Do I not? And like, it has to be done by a certain point. So fuck, it's like an album when they got a due date, I suppose, where it's like, fuck, I could always improve the song, but it has to have that end date.
Yeah. And I think there are some times where it's harder, where I write every day sort of news stories, and then sometimes I do magazine features and more long form stuff. And that longer form stuff is way harder because the news stories tend to follow a bit of a formula, where it's like sort of the news is at the top. There's a few quotes in there of how people are feeling about it. It's pretty straightforward and can be a bit robotic. But the features, where like I wrote one this week, it's not out yet. It's with the Telstra CEO, Andy Penn. And it's like 4,000 words, and no one's telling you how to do that. It's like, it's just up to you what you lead with, what you have in there. It's just like a really kind of creative process, but you know, you can't wait for that perfect sentence. Just start it and fix it later.
Do you ever have people come and hit you up and go, I love that fucking sentence. I love the way you encapsulated this story. Do you get that type of feedback?
I wish they did, because I feel like that when I do write an amazing sentence, and it's sort of like that keeps you going, like that feeling. Like it'd be like you guys, I'm sure, like when you have some good gag on the pod and you're like, oh yes, like that was really funny. But I wish people would tell me like a specific sentence. You have people give me feedback on a story, and it's nice to be reminded of that sometimes, where like you'll go into an office and you'll see someone's like framed the story that you wrote about them and stuff like that's really cool. But I wish it went down to the sentence level, where they were like, that sentence was amazing, because I feel that internally, but I've never had someone be like, oh, great sentence.
That's like if you were Dane Swan and someone said, I love that kick. You know, Swanee, you kicked that perfectly.
You'd be like, fuck, I'd like that kick too. Like, so it would be, if anyone wants to like give tribute to some of my amazing sentences, I'd really appreciate it.
I think honestly, some of the feedback that changed the way I think about stuff was when we got some feedback from a former guest, and she was like, I love the way you scoped out my full breadth of what I'm doing. And it was like, fuck, like that's to me was like, fuck, that's like impactful, because it's like, it makes me want to do that for fucking everyone now. You know what I mean? And that type of feedback, like just sending that message, like a lot of people just think it and they won't send it. But like when you do send stuff like that, it actually does make an impact.
100%. And it makes you feel really like seen, and that, you know, you're being appreciated. And you're right, it's like a small thing. It would take someone, you know, 30 seconds out of their day, but the impact can be really big. And it's a contrast too to I don't really read the comments of my own stories online, because they're pretty toxic most of the time, and it's not healthy. I think it's healthy to have a good relationship and engagement with your audience. I think like that's crucial, obviously. But I don't spend time in the weeds of the comment section of my articles, just because I feel like often, probably 90% of them are just negative. So I try to be mindful of who my audience are and who my readers are, because they pay the bills and keep us employed. But and I engage a lot on LinkedIn and social media, which for me tends to be more positive, particularly LinkedIn, where there are good, really sort of productive discussions on there. but the good productive discussions aren't happening in the comments section on the stories themselves.
What's going on there though? Why do you think people do that?
It's an insight into human
Behavior.
psychology and
I reckon
behavior.
that, like, imagine sitting at home and just going nuts in the. I couldn't think of having that much time in my hand to go and.
But there's no repercussions. Like, people just hide behind accounts and shit. It's easy for people to vent. You know what I mean? It's easy for people to just say, "Fuck, this is what I feel." Maybe a few people might like my comment, and that makes me feel good. You know?
That's like liking the sentence, isn't it?
A little.
It's the same.
And it's sort of like inserting yourself into the conversation as well, and feeling like, oh, I have something to say, I've got to say it. And rather than you're just chatting at the pub, which would be like your normal outlet, maybe amongst your mates, you'd be like, oh, here's my opinion on this. It's sort of, you're directing it as part of the conversation online. So, I mean, it can be, as I said, LinkedIn, like, you know, I'm only recently enjoying LinkedIn. I used to kind of just ignore it, but now it's probably my favorite social network to be in terms of posting my stories there, and just seeing the discussion that unfolds is really cool in a way that if I tweet or I just find LinkedIn's the best place for really productive discussion these days.
People like to flex too in the comments and show their thoughts and opinions on things because they know that they're seen.
That's when they want to feel intellectual.
Yeah.
But Twitter, and we're the same, Dave, on the fact that, like, LinkedIn for us, that's been the vehicle that helped us launch our pod. It's helped us really build our network. And I think it's got to do with the fact that it's your face. You know what I mean? People see that, like, your CV. Like, if you go out there and you're trashing people publicly on that, like, that's what people see. It's very different to other platforms. And I agree that it's nicer, but in a different way. Like, you feel more comfortable sharing things.
Yeah, absolutely. It'll be interesting to see where things go in terms of, like, I think as a journalist, I'm a bit on a pedestal in terms of, like, you know, I don't know, professional journalists, I suppose, we're being paid to, like, communicate to a mass audience, but we've seen a rise of social media where now everyone has a voice, and less people are reading newspapers these days or getting their news from, quote unquote, like, mainstream media. So it'll be interesting to see if, like, you know, my influence wanes over the journey as newspapers are less important as part of the discourse and things like that. Like, right now, you know, like, things are good. Elon's tweeting me that it would just be interesting over time to see sort of how that unfolds over the next sort of decade or so in terms of influence of, because right now people still come to me with their stories and see it as an important way to sort of share what their milestones are and what's happening, and it does have a lot of influence. But you know, you can feel that changing over time with influencers and with people getting their news from elsewhere. So it'll be an interesting one to watch.
I feel like the business element, though, they still want that credibility. You know, like, they want that publication behind it. Like, it's all well and good for people to have an audience, or dickheads like us to come out of nowhere and have this thing where it's
like the Channel 9 thing for us was huge.
Yeah, like,
you know what
we
I mean?
got a feature on Channel 9 early, which really helped
on
us.
Father's Day, prime time, and we
butchered it.
Haven't been asked back since, but it's good viewing. It's really good viewing.
Did it help? Did it, like, get sort of traffic and it helped?
Yeah, and I think, like, people coming out of the woodwork saying how much they want that for their businesses and for what they're doing. So you can definitely see the pull for that.
We chatted to Gabby Leibovich from Catch of the Day. One of the biggest learnings we had from that podcast was just, like,
he's a different cat.
He was out of control. Like, he brought his own bottle of, like,
he was having shots and shit. It was 7 a.m. Like, bro.
And he was
why didn't we do that?
Yeah, we should have done that. Sorry, but anyway, he said built brands in Australia are built in two ways. He was very much above the line or below the line. So this new digital paid ads, just push on their phones, all this in the public eye through credible print, through billboards, and I still think it's a real place where in Australia that's the credibility that people and businesses are really striving for, even if they have this. You're
competing in a big.
It's almost like old money versus new money a little bit. I don't know. It's the same sort of vibe, don't you think?
Yeah, I agree, and I can feel desperation is a pretty harsh word, but, like, sometimes when people are pitching, like, I can feel what it means to them, what they think it will do, and that's how sort of they really want this and need this in terms of they think that a story in the newspaper, like, what it will enable. And I try to push back on it a little bit and think that the way I think about it is more that, like, if what you're building is important, the media will come, rather than needing the media to make your business successful. I think it's a bit of, like, you need to get things in the right order, and that means like working on the core of what you're doing and focusing on that. And then then, as I said, the media will come. And I think sometimes the loudest voices are the ones that like, it's hard for me because sometimes people building the coolest shit are really quiet about it because they're busy building it and they're not trying to just promote themselves. So I guess I'm saying I take that responsibility seriously in terms of the things I choose to cover and the stories I choose to tell. I don't want to just do it because someone thinks that it's going to be a game changer for them. And it might be like for you guys, it helped, and it does help, and it is, you know, a helpful thing to be in the press, but you can't be sort of your only strategy to success, because that's probably not the right way to think about it.
It's like, be the party. Like instead of like, I remember going out and stuff and, oh, you got to talk, you need to pick up chicks and that, it's all this and it's all that. It's like, no, just have a fucking good time, dance with your mates, and people will just come over. You become the magnet. You know what I mean? It's like, and then the focus, like you said, smart people look at that and go, well, they're focusing on their business. They don't need all this other shit for them to make it work. But it looks cool for us too to jump on board what they're doing, because how fucking amazing is it? You know?
Yeah, 100%. And the other thing I'd say is like, for people like reach out to me on a human level, like a bit like you guys did, where it's not like the story and stuff comes later, but like just you don't have to connect with me on a like, here's our business pitch and this is your headline that you're going to write for us. Just be like, hey, I'd love to have a beer with you, I'd love to connect, and get that relationship, and then a story might come later, but it's just a more genuine thing than trying to like spam me.
And you can tell when people are pushing it or they're trying to get something out of you, aren't they? Like straight away, you're like, oh, they're pushing this. I can tell what they want. It sucks your energy away.
It must be weird for you though, because it's a weird balance to build relationships for you.
Yeah.
Because you're always like people trying to extract stuff out of you, but also still trying to be a friend. It's a weird place to build real friendship. Is it or not? I don't know.
Yeah, fuck. No one's put it like, that's something I think about quite a lot, where it's like, is this a real friendship? Like, are we actual friends? Or I don't know.
Too. Yeah.
Because people want like, but that's probably like every relationship, right? Where like there's always like value associated in certain ways. Like it is what it is, I think. And I just have to sort of trust my gut a little bit of like, you know, this is a genuine relationship that also has, it's kind of friends with benefits a little bit, right? Where it's like, oh, we're friends, and then also I get to like do stories with you, or, you know, you're feeding me, because all my best stories come from people I'm good friends with who hear gossip about certain things, and just, it's like they have a trusted relationship with me, so they know I'm going to do a good story with it, and that, you know, I'm a trustworthy journalist. So no one's put that to me before, but fuck, it is something I think about quite a lot in terms of just those relationships have all those different facets to them, and it's just something to be mindful of.
I think it's just hyper speed, and there's so many of them, you know, compared to probably the average person, you know what I mean? So you have to sift through, which you get a better bullshit detector. But I feel the same way too, because it's like, people obviously want to come on the pod and talk about what they're doing, but it's, you know, it's the same sort of thing when now
that we've cut down to one guest a week, like we did 2 guests a week, done over 250 guest episodes or whatever.
Met lots of people. Yeah.
It's like, we can't do all the chats, and we do a lot of this content for us. This podcast has been the vehicle that's allowed us to launch our community and build our business off the back, but it's been we do it for nothing, you know. We do it as it's the first thing that started, that people get to listen or absorb our content. We do a lot of it, but it's like, and then it's like, in return for them listening, they want to expect that they come on. It's like, what?
Yeah. One shift we've done recently over the past sort of 12 months is just, and it's sort of been a bit of an edict from like the editors higher up, is just do fewer stories and do longer and better ones. And I think that serves us really well in terms of just, we have to say no a lot more than we were. But I was pumping stuff out previously to be sort of like sometimes 2-3 stories a day, and you're just like pumping them out. And now it's like 1 a day or 1 every couple of days, but make them better, speak to more people for them. And particularly given we're like a paywalled publication, so, you know, the value has to be there. But it's sort of been a really nice outcome where I can just take longer and do better stuff. So, you know, it sounds like you guys are doing something similar in terms of just quality over quantity a little bit. And I think that's sort of the right way to go.
Well, I think we had to for us because we were rubbing sticks together. You know, we're a couple of nobodies and nothing. So to come from that, I suppose we had to put in all the hard work and show up every day and be consistent. But I think it's a self-awareness play. Like we knew for ages that we had to do video and focus more on quality, but now having that time and focusing on that, it's different.
It's a different dimension. But hey, talking of spending a bit of time on pumping a quality piece out, you've just done the top 100 innovators list. There's been a few former guests on the show that made the list. Pete Zaglinski, he's on there.
Nice.
But keen just to talk through that whole experience, being involved in that. I feel like it must be pretty cool to be around so many interesting people doing interesting things, which I can imagine it would be a hard thing to figure out who makes the list, who makes the cut.
For sure. Nearly died. No, that's probably it's a lot, right? It was like 100 plus pages, like 104 or something like that. And I wrote a lot of them. Like if you flip through the magazine, it's like probably about half of it I wrote. And we had a great team. I worked with the Vogue team, which was amazing. Because it's such a beautiful mag. It's like glossy, the photos look incredible. I loved working with the Vogue team. And then it was, myself and a team of journalists at The Australian putting it together. It was quite unscientific in terms of just the list itself. We had a big Google spreadsheet, and just myself and a team were populating it and talking constantly of like, there's no like metric of like, oh, you've raised X money or like whatever, because innovation is such a nebulous thing that's hard. You can't really measure it. It's sort of a really subjective thing, which is good in that I could use myself and the team and our advisory panel too, could just use our judgment more of like, who should we feature here? We tried to go a little bit more like away from the Atlassians and Canvas of the world, who are incredible, obviously, and have achieved a lot. But the point of this mag was to lift up and feature people that maybe hadn't had a media profile, or people got to read about them for the first time for a lot of them. So it was really cool. Just like, as I was saying before, I guess like people working quietly away on stuff that maybe don't have a huge profile, but we can really feature what they're doing. So it was a lot of fun. It was like 3 or 4 months. I took a huge break afterwards. I was just like, fuck yeah, it was just a lot. But probably the most rewarding thing I've done in terms of my career, in terms of, we had the first one last year and this year was the second one, and just the reaction was incredible. Didn't get anything from Elon, but just on LinkedIn, everyone else talking about it, and to have it out there in the world was after sort of, as I said, 3 or 4 months of work, to have it out there, a physical glossy thing, and for people to love it like they did was really cool.
I think it's important that you're shining a light on some of the businesses and companies and people who are doing some amazing stuff, who, like you said, might not have had that media presence. And I feel like that, that means a lot to people like that. And it's cool that you can showcase that and be one of the first ones to do so. So it's like part of their journey as well. I'm sure you've made lots of friends and stuff along your time just by seeing them go through all these different stages, and you become like that connection becomes insane, doesn't it?
Yeah, 100%. There's one in particular. I used to work from a co-working space in Richmond, in Melbourne, Inspire 9, and the Culture Amp guys were there, and there was about 8 of them, sort of the co-founders and some early employees. And now it's like literally thousands of staff. It's been watching them in real time over the past like decade, like grow from 8 to thousands. And now I do have that trusted relationship over a decade, and you can't fake that. I think it's a really important thing where it's like, you're either there or you're not. I think journalism is an interesting thing, because you sort of, the nature of it is you're reporting on something from the outside, like you're a crime reporter, you're reporting on the crime from the outside. But I try to get as close as I can to the people building the stuff, so that my stories will be better as a result. And that means having these real relationships with some of these founders that have built their companies into billion-dollar businesses, and you can't you can't fake that relationship. You just have to put the effort in.
The Aussie tech landscape has gone pretty crazy over the past decade. If you look at that graph of number of unicorns that have existed in that thing and just seeing like the growth curve that it is, what are some of the things that, like you mentioned, being the culture amps, but what are some of the other things that you've either covered or seen grow along the way that's been crazy to look back and reflect on?
They've been a big one. I think obviously the Canva story. I did the first ever story on Canva in terms of like they showed
There you go.
some dinner a year or two ago. They're like they printed it out and they're like, oh, this is the first media we ever had. And that was cool. That was like they'd just released I think it was a smartphone app or an iPad app, and I said, oh, here's this new app that's out. My bar has changed a little bit in terms of like I wouldn't cover that now. Like I don't do stories that are like here's a new app that exists. It's like I've lifted my bar a little bit in terms of so sorry for anyone listening. It's like build the app first and then it might be newsworthy a little bit later on. So watching them, I think in general just watching Australia become relevant, like in a startup and technology sense, where I used to sort of travel to the US a lot for work, and you just realize back then at least how far off we were and how like people wouldn't be talking about us, and they do now. So just collectively watching Australia be relevant in the global sort of startup and tech conversation has been good.
It's like going to Tassie. They live back in the 90s. You know what I mean? I'm like, fuck, how cool is this? It's like, takes you back though, memory lane.
You went there recently and you did say that.
It is a bit, but that's why I liked it. There's a bit of charm about it. But yeah, anyway.
Yeah, it's not about
that's
Tassie.
A pointless story, whatever.
What on the list, let's get back to the list. Is there any like, you allowed to have favorites? I know that you might have put the favorite number one, but someone might have been like in the 70s that you're like, I like this.
Well, it wasn't like ranked, right? So like they were all equal in terms of it was more just like here's 100. Well, it's not like the hottest 100 or whatever. It's like here's our 100 and we're just featuring all of them. In general, I would say some of the ag tech ones were really cool shit that it was a bit of like a blind spot for me of like learning all this sort of stuff about insect waste. And obviously climate change is like, what point is sort of any of these companies if our planet doesn't exist down the track. So some of these ag tech companies, just learning about them, I think for me, like it's really energizing to learn about new concepts and things that like quantum computing as well, where it's just like sci-fi kind of shit. That stuff was really fun.
Was it Kevin Baum at AgriWeb or whatever, where they were measuring like the dam levels and stuff on the farms and shit? I was like, what the fuck? Like, this is crazy. Like, so many smart people putting their smarts to like good use, like to actually give a shit. Like,
it must be weird. We talk about it all the time because you cover people, like people pitching your stories about this company got funded and this company got funded, and we're like, you hear these sort of ones, but it's like, oh, that's a real world problem. Like they're solving a big problem. It's like, or nah, such and such raised 10 mil for some little plug-in that does fuck all for anything that really doesn't provide much value in the scheme of things, but
it's sexy.
Like let's all celebrate and clap.
100%. I think like there's something just sexy about software, or maybe it's just easier to sort of report on, or it's an easier story to tell, where it's like, like we're a cloud-based software that sort of sells itself, blah, blah, blah. And that's just an easier concept to get your head around compared to doing shit with insects or dam levels and things like that. So I think that's what I enjoyed, was taking some of those things that hadn't been really reported on at all. And it still was a challenge for me to distill that into like 2 sentences or 3 sentences for the list. But it's like, that was really rewarding, being able to showcase some of those ones that aren't sexy, but I think they're sexy.
What about the differences between physical media and digital media? So, you got that nice glossy book that's just sexy as, it's looking amazing, versus the stuff that's looking sexy as on your iPad. What are some of the differences?
It was really hard because I was an online journalist first and then print later. So it's like I almost went around the wrong way, I suppose, in terms of like I had to learn that for a story in print, it has to like fit the box. I was just used to being able to write however much I wanted and just go for it. And now it's like you have this physical box that will only fit 500 words. So you have to be really judicious about what you leave in and what you cut. So I think print has forced me to be more thoughtful about what I write, because as I said, it's just a finite thing.
Are you sending the shit out of everything, like words, and going, fuck, this is like 3 words. Surely there's 1 word for these 3
uses
things.
Grammarly.
Yeah,
for sure.
Surely there's something there, isn't there, that can help
I've
you?
got like an internal Grammarly in my brain that does it.
Yeah.
That's what I did my communications degree for.
To learn that shit.
Every time I go on the thing, I think they're trying to tell me I don't use Grammarly, but I get the ad like every day.
I know.
They must say because I'm shit at what I do.
No.
But what about the difference for you seeing your stuff online when you log in versus like people are reading it? It's in their hands. It's sitting on their coffee tables.
What means more? What? Yeah.
It's still a thrill to see someone else reading print and reading your words in print. And it's still a thrill to see my face or my byline in print in a way that online it's not. Just the ephemeral and sort of digital nature of online, it's just not the same. So I'm stoked that print still exists. And I'm pretty bullish that I'd give it another at least like decade, because I think for a long time print declined in terms of circulation and things like that, and everyone was saying, oh, newspapers are dead. But we're at a place now where I think that it's plateaued, and yes, they don't print as many as they used to, but enough people are still buying them that it makes commercial sense. And I know they share like printing facilities with like between competitors and things like that. So I think it's like sustainable for, I'd give it at least a decade in terms of print, which I'm happy about. I still get a kick out of it.
I think it's like almost like vinyl records. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
there were CDs, right? When we were growing up, it was CDs. I remember Offspring, Americana, Conspiracy One, all that shit. But then I was like, fuck, I'm not getting any fucking vinyl. Mum's like, I got Purple Rain on vinyl and Bon Jovi and shit. I'm like, oh, that's cool. What the fuck's vinyl? Like, where do you play it on? But now I'm obsessed. Like I collect vinyl and I'm just like full blown nuffy. It peaks and declines, doesn't it? Stuff like that. Do you feel like that's sort of what's happening with the print? Because I'd still love a physical copy of like old stuff.
It's a different experience reading online versus having it in your hand.
Yeah,
I think
it's a different thing, and I think like the mag is a really good example where it's such a special thing to me, the printed version, where scrolling through the PDF just like doesn't even come close at all. And the glossy printed thing does reflect, I think, the work we put in, and like just I'm really proud of it. And I think the PDF is still handy to have a flick through, but like it just isn't the same thing at all as this really beautiful magazine. So I hope it just sort of keeps going as long as I'm working, because the one thing is if you fuck up, you can't like fix a typo. So it does make you sort of like online, I can just go in and just fix something really quickly. But so you need to sort of triple check everything in print before it goes out, because you can't fix it.
Imagine the old typewriters back in the day. I always look at that and go, if they just like fuck something up, that's just annoying. Like imagine
it's a lot of rework, isn't it?
It's a lot of rework, and you're just like, no.
Yeah. So you gotta, I mean, it's good. It forces you to just, be really fucking careful with everything you do, which is a pretty good habit to be in.
So when's the David Swan memoir coming out? All them physical copies? You're just gonna get that happening? Any autobiographies or anything like that?
People keep telling me like everyone's got a, particularly journalists, well, they say everyone's got a book in them, right? And a lot of my colleagues have taken book leave in the past couple of years. It's pretty sweet. Like you get sort of a few months off to go and work away on whatever book it is that you and I'm like, shit, I need to do that. I just haven't settled on what. Like I've got options. I think, like I was saying with Culture Amp, some of those startup stories are pretty amazing in terms of like, I know the AFR journos did like Afterpay, for example. So, you could do something like that where you cover, the growth of one of those startups from 2 people into 20,000 or whatever. And so I'll definitely have a book in me. It wouldn't be a memoir. I think my life's been too stable and not enough drama, to be honest. But in terms of telling someone else's drama in book form, I'd love to.
I love that. Yeah, because I've read a lot of autobiographies and stuff, and when they write it with someone else, and it's just, you can tell like to get that insight, it's like the fly on the wall type of thing. Like we had Attic Ponya on, and he does a lot of content with basketball, and they feel comfortable with him because he's a former basketball, semi-pro, pro, whatever. But he knows what the locker room's like. He knows when to butt in and when to say, oh, can we get more out of this and stuff like that, and when to just hold it, which I'm sure you develop them same skills. Yeah.
Definitely. I remember at the start of my career, I'd go in with like my 10 questions that I would ask. Might have been like you guys when you started, I don't know, where you almost learn over time the art of having a better conversation, which is more free flowing and just more people, like, rather than your 10 set questions, you learn that you get better outcomes when you just have a chat. And so I it's not that I prepare less, I still prepare the same, but it's just like I'm not going in with my 10 preconceived questions. I've still done my research, but I'm more open to the conversation going where it goes and letting people share more, and you get a better story as a result.
You said you cringe when you go back 10 years and see what your early stuff was. You should see when we do our first few pods, they're like embarrassing. And the worst part is if you've come along, you can see
That's why it's good though, because people need to see where you start.
We cut out all there was no flat lock cut them out. We had 10 questions. The first pod only went for like 12 minutes. You know,
we burnt the first guest.
I feel so bad for it. I was your friend. He come on, he agreed to come on, and
we might as well give him a shout out. Just throw him under the bus again. Just don't give him the mention.
I know, he's doing great things at Accenture, but
it's the art of listening though, isn't it? And it's like if someone reveals something about themselves, they clearly want to talk about it. Like if they mention something that is just like, oh, they've mentioned music twice. Like, what are your favorite bands? Like that's clearly what they want to talk about. Like it's making it interesting for them too, you know, rather than just like, especially people who get interviewed all the time. They'll be like, oh, here's the same shit. Fucking, oh yeah, we raised this and stuff. It's like boring, you know?
Well, and that's, I try to never do email interviews either, because when you get an emailed response to any question, it's just either it's gone through the PR or comms person, or it's just a really sort of filtered response. Whereas obviously on the phone or in person, it's just always a better outcome. So I always try to do interviews either in person or over the phone or Zoom, but because email is just never any good.
It's a pretty interesting time in the tech world at the moment. There's been some lot of layoffs, redundancies, people scaling back, investment, all that sort of stuff. What are your thoughts on state of play and where do you see it going?
Yeah, I found like the tone of my stories has changed a lot, where the last couple of years have been obviously such a boom time, and it's been amazing to tell all these, particularly amid the pandemic when everything was so shit. It was nice to have some sort of good news where it was like, tech as a sector did really well, a lot of capital flowing in, a lot of hiring and new startups starting, and it was just like all my stories were good news stories. And now I'm finding that you know, as journalists, we sort of just cover whatever's in front of us. We don't have, I think it's a misconception sometimes where people think like I'm a cheerleader, or that, you know, and it's like we just cover, we don't swing one way or the other. It's like the good ones don't anyway. We just cover what's in front of us and try to be as close to the truth as possible. But the last few months have been rough, obviously, and every second story I'm doing is sort of layoffs or you know, valuations are down and things like that. It feels to me just, it's not, I don't overthink it in terms of it's just a reflection of like the macroeconomic conditions, and it's not that these are bad businesses or that the VCs have made like bad bets or anything like that. It's just the conditions that these businesses are in has meant that, you know, money is harder to come by and valuations are challenged. I think that's where the relationships bit comes into it, where it's someone flicking me an email saying, hey, here's the all-staff email that we sent out this morning, laying off 17% of our staff. And that's someone trusting me to not tell it in a sensationalist, clickbaity way. It's just, I'm going to be fair about it. So the relationships are key. But it definitely feels like the next year or so, it's going to be this way for the next sort of 12 months or so. That's sort of what I'm hearing and what I'm feeling. And it's my job to still reflect that, but in a fair and sensitive way rather than a sensationalist way. So my role is the same in terms of just reflecting what's happening. It's just the tone is definitely shifted.
Do you try and, like, I know with like mainstream media, they'll have all the news and what's going on in the world, and then they'll show like new kittens and stuff. Do you search for like positives in some sense where you go, fuck, it can't be all there has to be a bit of optimism in some fucking story that we got.
Yeah, I don't search for it, but I as I said, I try to accurately reflect whatever's happening, and then if that's good news, then it's good news, right? Like I you know, I'm open to that just as much as I'm open to a layoff story.
Yeah.
So like if you've got cool shit that deserves a story and should be out there, then I'm open to that in as much as I'm open to anything else. So yeah, I just sort of play whatever's in front of me. I think, yeah, it's things like the Innovators mag, for example. It is still important to celebrate innovation, and it's still important to celebrate the wins and the cool shit, because it's not all doom and gloom. There is still amazing stuff happening, and there are still companies being formed, and some companies are still hiring. So it's important to reflect that as well.
Our sponsor of the show, Heaps Normal. Question we ask all our guests is, what's your version of Heaps Normal? What's the thing you turn to when you're looking to get some energy back in your life?
I had like the week after the magazine came out, I took 3 days to a cabin in the woods, just went device free. I read books. That felt pretty heaps normal to me in terms of just I think, as I said, like as journalists, we're inherently like plugged in and switched on and need to know what's going on, and to just really deliberately switch that off felt incredible. So being in a cabin in the woods with some whiskeys, that was pretty, I mean, is that bad for the sponsor if I'm promoting alcohol as well? I don't know.
No, it's your
bit of
normal,
Wolf
mate.
Creek style, mate. You know what I mean? He's got the cabin, just going hunting, just fucking
Dexter.
But how is it? I find it like I have a background in recruitment. I found it really hard to switch off at night. You know what I mean? Like, because you have to be responsive. And if something happens, if you get an email and it's 10 o'clock and I'm watching a movie or something, like, fuck, I got to get on this or something like that. Did you have to set like harsh boundaries, or did you have to learn the hard way around? Fuck, I am nonstop. Like, I'm checking my phone in the fucking shower. What's going on? You know?
It's hard because you have to, and you're not talking about in the woods, right? You're talking about in like real life.
When your busy life, the hyper busy life,
Pre-woods.
Pre-kill.
I think I'm at peace with the fact that I have to have at least a low level of being always on all the time, and because I've had news stories, not often, but there's been stuff where something will break at like 9 p.m. and it's like, and I'll be out to dinner, and I have to like drop everything and go home and write it. And it's like that happens. And I have to be, it's like part of the job really is like, you have to always be on a little bit, because something might be big enough that you have to sort of just drop everything and cover it. So it's like, I'm just sort of at peace with that. Yeah.
Oh, because that could be a good one too. Even if you don't have a story, but you're at some event and you're like, fuck, I just want to go home. You could just say, look, I've got a believable excuse that I can just go back. I've got a big story to write.
My emails. You know?
yeah, like breaking news. Like, I'm really bored and have to go. Yeah.
What about some of the books? You mentioned you're in the woods reading some books. What are some recommendations? Podcasts, TV shows, all that sort of good stuff.
Yeah. I read The Road when I was in the cabin in the woods. Don't read that in the cabin in the woods. It's like apocalyptic. It's a great book, but like just not when you're on your own, like at midnight. It's like scary. I think in general with podcasts, at least, I try to like listen to the dumbest shit. And same goes for my viewing habits as well, actually, where my day is so go and so connected to the tech and business worlds, where then when I sort of 5 o'clock hits and switch off, or try to, it's like old Simpsons episodes, bad reality shows, basketball podcasts. So like my media diet during the day is all tech and business, and then after hours it's just like whatever the dumbest shit is, just to be able to try and like switch off.
Oh, I love that.
Somewhat.
You're speaking our language.
100%. I just think that I've been telling everyone, the smarter you are, the dumber stuff you like. You know what I mean? So I'm like, that's my excuse for saying I like all that stuff too, because I didn't think I'd like Love Island and shit. But then you get fucking hooked. You're like, who's this guy? I would never do that in my life. You know what I mean? And you're just like, how fucking crazy is this? And
That's
what you
why I
need.
started the first season I've watched this season.
Yeah.
I was like, I'm so happy that I'm just switching off and this is dumb as fuck. I can't believe they're on the
Yeah.
TV doing this and I'm watching it. How good's life?
Yeah. It's just, yeah.
100%. That's like, yeah, I'm glad I found some boys after my own heart. Just sometimes you just need the dumbest fucking thing and it works. And then it works. And then next day you can go back to business life. But sometimes, yeah, just after hours, you just need that. Absolutely.
You can't learn all the time and you can't absorb all that
Yeah,
stuff in
no.
there. Like I've for a while there, I remember maybe like 4 years ago.
Infobesity, I think.
I was just like,
what,
I was cramming pods. It was always like, hey, how can I like listen to more stuff or like consume an Audible or like, I need to learn stuff. I need to know stuff.
1.25 speed.
Yeah, I want to like get it all in there.
Yeah,
Now it's like, I honestly want it to leave me alone.
I want to look at the grass.
Yeah,
Watch the grass.
leave
grow.
me alone because I can't take any more in.
And you don't want to burn out too. Like, I think having those 3 days in the woods, like, was so necessary. And I was feeling burnt out before that and being like, fuck, like, because it's just such an intense line of work. But I think, you know, you're going to be a better worker if when you're, you know, in your after hours, you're chilling out and relax. It's like, it's necessary. You need it. And it'll prolong and make you a better worker at whatever that 9 to 5 is, for sure.
Did you go like full hunter gatherer? Like, what are we talking about out in the woods? Are you like
Fire?
It was pretty
how
glampy.
disconnected are we talking? You still have Wi-Fi or not?
I made a fire, but I had like those fire lighters. Does that count?
Yeah,
Like,
bro, that counts. I was when I was in Tassie, I had the fire lighters, and I was like, I'm full caveman. I was taking photos. I was like, how impressive.
The one, like, I had to sort of explain to my partner, like, oh, I'm going away for 3 days. She's like, oh, you're not taking me with you? And it was hard having that conversation in terms of I was just said, look, a couples retreat is just like a different thing, and I would love to go with you, and we'll go next time. And I will, now that I've said that on the pod, it's like I'm obligated, and I would love to. We'll go next time as a couple, but there's a lot to be said for being on your own and just having no one else. And it's nothing about her at all. It's just sometimes you need that alone time. Didn't hunt anything, didn't gather anything, just came with my like supermarket food and ate that. But I did make a fire, which was cool. And I did journal a little bit, and it just helped me get a bit of perspective on, as I said, I was feeling a bit burnt out. But just to have that alone time and to journal a little bit made me feel really energized. So it was good shit.
It's about zooming out, yeah, and like seeing yourself and going, fuck, what is actually going on? Because your life would be so fucking chaotic. Like, I'm sure there's routines and stuff, but it's like, it doesn't feel like you got a second or a minute. So you have to recalibrate. Otherwise you're like, what the fuck for? Why am I even doing
it's
this?
Like it restarting the computer for every now and again.
Yeah, shit. That's good metaphor. And that's exactly what it felt like. And it worked, which is
Who's your favorite basketball player?
Joel Embiid.
Yeah, the process. Why do you like him so much?
I trust the process, man. I think I got into the NBA through Ben Simmons and him, and so I'm a Philly man. But Joel just seems to dominate, but goes about it in a way with like a real good sense of humor. Like, he's such a character. So you know, really strong meme game, great Twitter game, and great on-court game too, which is
what about Philly burning Ben Simmons, the fans burning his jersey in the streets? That was crazy.
Yeah, look, I can't say. I mean, I've got 3 Ben Simmons jerseys myself. Haven't burned them, but let's just say I haven't worn them since he left the team. So look, I'm grateful to him for like getting me into basketball, which was cool. Like, I've got the league pass. Like, I'm all in. Like, I'm sometimes waking up at like 4 or 5 a.m. for the games and shit. So like, I'm grateful to him for getting me into NBA. But you know, best of luck to him at the Nets.
I've seen some photos of James Harden though this summer, and he's put in the work. He's lost a bit of weight, and I've seen it's his birthday last week.
Yeah,
and
did you wish him happy birthday?
No. There's a meme going around of him. He had the big birthday cake, and he's obviously on a big. You got private yacht party, and he threw the cake over the thing. Said no cake. He's in training mode, so they're a big chance.
I don't want to get too excited because they've disappointed me at every step, like the last couple of years since I've been a fan. They fill you with hope and then they just get like bundled out in the second round of the playoffs. So I don't want to get ahead of myself. But a bit like the Swannies in terms of the AFL, quietly excited without trying to get ahead of myself. Yeah.
Oh, mate, well, it's a big game tonight. We'll know, obviously, when this podcast comes out, we'll know the result. But I reckon you're a big chance against the D's.
Don't do that because I do too. And I commonly cite the 2012 grand final as the best day of my life when the Swans overcame Hawthorn. Spent $800 on a ticket on Gumtree, just went on my own and had like the best fucking day. So all I'll say is I did earlier this year pay $100 for the Premiership Club for so I can buy grand final tickets. And I'd heard from Josh Kennedy's, this is like 3 or 4 years ago, Josh Kennedy's trainer had said 2022 was like the year that they're building towards in terms of and that was like 4 years ago, in terms of like the youth sort of having a few more years and all coming together.
And you've got the inside scoop. You're a band who gets the scoop. So this is...
So you're looking at Ollie Florent tearing it up, row bottom coming through. You love
all coming together. The Lizard being the Lizard.
He's so good, bro. And even Rampy. I look at someone like Rampy, just cool, calm, collected, just knows what's up.
Fuck, you know? We should have done the Dane Swan thing and just made this a footy podcast.
It could have been fun. We were like, this started off as a business podcast, and then on Wednesdays we started going through the tips, and then it became a bit of an AFL thing because we just love talking about it. But
covering some conspiracies for a while. We talked on Jeffrey Epstein and that. We're just like, it started as business, but we think the same thing. People don't want serious all the time, so we give them serious and we mix in some fun stuff. So thanks again for jumping on and letting us pick your brain. I reckon this is an unreal chat. Loved it.
Go Swannies.
Yeah, go Swannies. That's it.